Welcome to the Bowden Blitz ACC edition. I'm Joe Lisi, joined by former National Coach of the Year, Terry Bowden. Coach, great games on tap for week number 9, but we're going to take a look back at some dynamic performances in week number 8. We'll start in Louisville. Miami was on the road as a 4.5-point road favorite. They got the job done, but it was a high-scoring affair. The Hurricanes prevail 52-45. Cam Ward with 319 yards through the air, 4 touchdowns, but the game was a little too close for comfort in the second half.
Yeah, it was a little bit different from Miami. Remember their previous 2 games, they had to come from way behind to catch up and win at the end. This one, they got ahead, and then they had to fight off Louisville and see if they could keep their attention and fight off Louisville, and they did that. Cam came back and threw a touchdown pass at the end to secure the victory. But it's another case, again, of Miami either not being ready to play at the beginning of the game or kind of losing their focus at the end of the game. Really, I think Miami's biggest opponent is themselves. When they play their best football, they can beat anybody. Cam Ward is the best quarterback for any team he would play for in the country, I believe.
I agree, and Damian Martinez and the rushing attack did take over in the second half. Martinez with 89 rushing yards on the ground, averaged well over 4 yards per carry, did have the big touchdown to really seal the deal, put Miami up by double digits in the fourth quarter. Coach, when you look at the offense, we know they can score on any defense in the country, but I guess the main concern is the defense, right? They're a bend but don't break type of unit. We've seen special teams break down last week with the kickoff return for a touchdown, really changed the momentum in the second half in favor of Louisville. Do you feel like the Hurricanes front 7 right now playing their best, or can they kick it up a notch to potentially challenge the likes of Clemson should they square off in the ACC title game?
Yeah, their defensive front should be the strongest part of their defense. They're not playing up to the level they're capable of playing. I don't know if they just don't get cranked up or they're not in sync or working together. You know, you get so many portal transfers together, and they don't meld until halfway through the season. They don't blend together and work together. But I think that's the one thing Miami has got to do. They've got to play better four-quarter defense, because somewhere along the line, either first quarter or last quarter, they slow down. They don't play quite as intense, and it hurts them. They do have the talent. I think they got an unbelievable talent up front, and they need to continue to get better, because it's going to get better and better, more interesting as the season goes along.
When you look at Cam Ward as well, we talked about the performance over 300, again, 4 touchdowns, his ability to always keep his eyes downfield and extend plays. Entering that matchup last week, Miami did have the number 1 ranked third down offense in college football, converting 60% of their third down opportunities. They convert 9 of 15 last Saturday. Is that due more to the play calling or just Cam Ward being that great leader?
No, it's a little bit of both. I think you've got to do what he does well, but you're not going to be 9 for 15 and then 2 for 2 on fourth downs. You're not going to be that without a quarterback that can make all the throws, and also the offensive coordinator calling the plays that he handles very well. But that's one of what makes them so special on offense. He continues to control the ball, and they keep the ball on offense because he makes so many third downs. And we'll see some of the other games that we talk about later on where teams, quarterbacks could not convert their third down plays. They got beat.
Coach, when you see the last 3 games, they struggled with Virginia Tech in 1. They didn't get the cover, right? The Hail Mary. They struggled and came from behind against Cal. They had another 1-score game against Louisville this past Saturday. They do cover as a 4.5-point favorite, but they've been in 4-quarter games in 3 straight weeks. Is that a benefit potentially heading into the college football playoff and even more importantly, an ACC championship game?
I have always said after the fact, after I've won the game, that's the best thing that happened to us, because you want your players to be put in a position where you're going to see how they respond. Miami has been in that every game practically this year, or most of the games after the first game. They've been having to come back or having to hold a team off. But I'm going to say that they're going to be favored in all their final games. They're going to be favored FSU. I've never seen the spot that they've got on FSU. But again, they have got to make sure they win those games, because they're favored in every game. They don't play Clemson during the regular season.
And they have their rivalry game this Saturday at home, 21-point favorites against Florida State. We'll dive into that a little bit later in the show. Let's take a look at the Clemson Tigers. They're on a bye this week. Next week, they do face off against the Louisville Cardinals, but this team may be the hottest in the country. They pick up the victory at home yet again over Virginia and Tony Elliott. Clemson dominates 48-31. They do not get the cover as 21.5-point favorites in that matchup, but that's another dynamic offensive output by Cade Klubnik and the Clemson Tigers.
You know what? So I think what's so exciting about Cade Klubnik is that he really didn't have a good game. He had 3 interceptions. He started out real slow, and it was kind of a disaster to start. And he still had 3 touchdown passes, over 300 yards. The great ones, that's what they did. They don't start down on themselves. They look straight ahead, next play, bring it up, and he brought them back, and they began to slowly put points on the board and really stretch the lead. Those last points by Virginia just made it look a little closer than it was.
Coach, they're 5-1 overall since they started, right? They're on an absolute heater. They're undefeated in the conference at 5-0. And I've always said sometimes a bye week could be a benefit or a detriment depending upon when it falls in the regular season. They're the hottest team from an offensive perspective with Miami in the conference, right? Would you say that this week is in fact a benefit to the Clemson Tigers to get healthy, or could it disrupt the timing 2 weeks down the road when they face off against Louisville?
Well, Joe, you dealt the 2 main issues all of us coaches have. Are we banged up? Do we need to give some rest to our football team? If we're not banged up, let's go right to the next game. We're hot right now. Let's keep that fire going. So it all depends on where your team is. Are you having a lot of injuries? And usually you do about this time of the season. And so you say, basically I want to have that off week to get well. But, man, I know in coaching the number of years I coached, when I was hot, I want to get out there and play the next Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely, Coach. We'll see how that plays out. We'll break down that game next week, Clemson and Louisville. I do want to talk about Florida State briefly. Yeah. They did lose to Duke, first time in program history, 22-0 overall. They lost as a 3.5-point underdog to the Duke Blue Devils. They cut the deficit to 20-16, couldn't make it a 4-quarter game and pull it out in the fourth quarter. Mike Norvell right now, 1-6 overall. This team is reeling. Your thoughts about where this program is, and more importantly, is Mike Norvell the coach in 2025?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think he went undefeated last year. I know this year is a problem, and it's going to be miserable for a lot of FSU fans. But I do think he has a chance to get through this season and start over. I don't think it's a year that you panic too much. But this offense is horrible right now. They have no answer at quarterback. Well, they had three turnovers on 3 consecutive plays in the first half. They go to the backup. He's not terrible, but he's not the answer. They would have put him in a long time ago if he was the answer, but they go back to their starter. They have no answers at quarterback, which means they have no answers on offense, which means it's just almost everybody that comes in like Miami are going to be able to put some points on them, and they're not going to be able to stay close.
With a rivalry game on tap, from a mindset perspective, is there the possibility for Florida State emotionally to rebound after losing to Duke? How do you rally the troops as a head coach when you're in that type of predicament?
Well, you address their pride. You tell those players, look in the mirror. But what kind of pride do you have? What kind of fight do you have? Are you going to fight? Or are you going to quit? That's the angle you got to take. But what's concerned me all year? All these portal transfers. They spend 1 year here, 1 year there. They're not really any school colors or any school they're loyal to. These players on the Florida State team, I don't think they know the history of the Florida State-Miami games and how important this game was, how big it was. It used to determine every recruit in Florida, whether they were going to go to Florida State or Miami. This game was the determining factor, and now these guys don't know much about it at all. I don't think the rivalry factor affects those players that come out of the portal.
We'll see how they respond this coming Saturday. They're on the road catching 21.5 points to the Miami Hurricanes. That'll be one of the games Coach and I will touch on in next segment. When Coach and I return, we'll break down the 4 biggest games in the conference, led by, believe it or not, Notre Dame. Even though they're not in the conference, they play an ACC schedule, and the Navy Midshipmen top 25 battle. Keep it where it is on the Bowden Blitz. Back on the Bowden Blitz, Joe Lisi and Terry Bowden breaking down ACC action. Week number 9, we're going to start with a top 25 battle. We talked about Notre Dame before the break. They're in the top 25. They're squaring off in New Jersey in MetLife against the Navy Midshipmen, part of the American Conference. Notre Dame does play an ACC schedule, so we'll touch on it, Coach. You got number 12 versus number 24 on a neutral field. Notre Dame dominated Georgia Tech last week in Atlanta. They get the victory 31-13. They cover as a 13.5-point road favorite. When you look at Riley Leonard and this team from an offensive perspective, they're starting to gel into form, but there is no margin of error for Notre Dame in this matchup. They lose to Navy, they're out of the college football playoff.
And these games against the academies, and I'm going to throw Vanderbilt into that category too, because they're playing what I call an academy offense. Great wishbone, smart, disciplined. That's what Navy's going to bring. And this is going to be a game of athletic ability versus scheme, because Notre Dame has players that, Navy doesn't dream of having, because that's not how they recruit their players. So Notre Dame's got to let their size, skill, speed overcompensate for the scheme that Navy has. Because if you don't scheme them properly on defense, you don't slow Navy down. They make 7-minute drives, and all of a sudden you make a 6-minute drive. All of a sudden you're in the second quarter, and there's only been 2 possessions. And that's what, again, a team like Navy does. They want to control the football. They want a long drive, long score, and hope you haven't put in a good scheme. Because I've coached against Army a couple of years ago. When you take teams like that, if you don't have the right scheme, you're never going to stop them.
When you look at Riley Leonard in this passing attack, right, I've always said that the way you beat the triple option, for me, it's almost like a basketball game, up-tempo versus a half-court type of style, right? If you're the team that can run the floor, you want to jump up early, put the pressure on Navy to play from behind and get out of their game plan. So if you have a lethal passing attack with a dynamic quarterback, that is the best recipe to defeating the triple option. But when you look at Notre Dame right now, Riley Leonard last week completes 20 of 29, 209 yards, 1 interception. He struggled with consistency in the passing game. That could be an Achilles heel or weakness of Notre Dame's offense heading into this matchup.
That's a good point, Joe, because when you're playing a team that runs the option, and they've got players that run the option, in practice they can't simulate Notre Dame's skill. The problem with Notre Dame, they're not a great passing team, because the way you beat a team like this, you throw the football. They don't have the secondary. They don't have the looks in practice. They don't have the athletes that run that type of offense. So they're good against the run, but that passing game hurts them. So it will be important that Notre Dame gets some effective passing going on along with their running attack, and then just make plays. You've got better people. You're faster than what they can simulate in practice. Go make the plays, make the tackles, play good football, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I see this game playing out that Navy's going to be within the 13-point number. I think I lean to the under 51.5 just because both teams, I think, want to run the football. That Notre Dame secondary has played lights out this year, holding opposing quarterbacks under 50% completion percentage. But if you're Navy, you do have the ability to play with house money. You're the underdog in this matchup. You're undefeated. You're potentially looking to become a conference champ and crack the college football playoff as well. You could throw caution to the wind and maybe throw more trick plays, or at least try to keep Notre Dame off guard with throwing out all of the stops in this ball game. Is that correct?
No, absolutely. Navy's on the big stage. This is a huge game for Navy. If you knock off Notre Dame, I'm telling you, that's unbelievable. These teams are undefeated. But Notre Dame's got to be thinking the same thing. We win this game and the rest of our games, we've got only 1 loss. We're sitting pretty as we're looking at the college football playoff. So that both these teams will be geared up for this game. It's going to be a matter of talent versus scheme. And I think both teams are going to be geared up. Navy's going to try to approach it with perfect execution, and Notre Dame's got to make big plays over top or through the middle.
We'll see how that game plays out. It is played in MetLife. That's an afternoon kick, and Notre Dame on back-to-back road games, so keep an eye out for that. Coach and I will turn our attention to the matchup in South Beach. The Miami Hurricanes, number 7 in the country, take on Florida State. When you look at Florida State, they have won 2 straight in the series, picked up this victory last year in Tallahassee by 7 points. But I think hands down, Coach, Miami has the offensive advantage. They have the quarterback in Cam Ward. I just don't know what to expect out of Florida State. Even though it's a rivalry game, I do, in fact, believe that Miami wins this ball game convincingly and covers the 21.5-point number.
I'm with you, and I hate to say it because of my dad being at Florida State so long, but they've got problems. They played horribly last week on offense. It was horrible to watch, and they have no answers to it. They can't score. Anybody's going to play Miami, you've got to keep the score going, and they can't score. And eventually, and I agree with you, Miami's going to win the game, and they're going to cover on this game, and I'd take them both because there's just too much offense. And FSU, if they had the answers, we would have seen it along the way. They'll have some pride, I'm sure, and they'll fight hard, but they're playing in Miami's backyard, and they're playing a very talented team. And remember, Miami would like to rub it in. This is an old rivalry. And Miami wants to score as much as they can. So they'll be out there to prove to those recruits around Miami and South Florida that Miami is the place to go, not Florida State.
And that's why I think the 54.5 might be in play as well, because Miami, to your point, if they get up at, let's say, 28, 35 points, they'll throw caution to the wind. Why not win it by 50, just to your point? And you want to have that offensive continuity heading into week number 10.
Let me say this, so Miami's going to score all the points because no matter how high they go, the other team's not going to help too much with points. So I agree with you, but Miami's going to have to have a field day to get that over because I don't think Florida State's going to score much at all.
When you think about turnarounds, Coach, right, we've seen teams potentially make the college football playoff and back down. Look at Michigan this year, not as dominant as they were last year. But for a team that was 13-0 to potentially be 1-7, this has got to be one of the worst stories in college football in terms of year to year.
Well, it's all about the quarterback position. A quarterback touching the ball 50% of every game. This is the same problem Oklahoma offense has. They don't have a quarterback that can take their offense and score with it, and there are no ways to solve the problems.
When Coach and I return, we'll talk about the two remaining games in the conference, Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech, and the battle in Durham, two teams that have one loss, SMU and Duke, coming right back on the Bowden Blitz. Keep it where it is. Joe Lisi, Terry Bowden, diving into week number 9 in the ACC. We'll turn our attention to the battle in Blacksburg. Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech 5-3 on the season. They dropped the game against Notre Dame last week, 31-13. Their starting quarterback, Haynes King, was out for that matchup. There's the potential for him to be back under center on the road. They're 10.5-point dogs in this ball game against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech looking for answers. They're 4-3 overall, Coach, but they're at home laying 10.5. I think they might get it done against Georgia Tech.
To me, it's whether Haynes King plays or not. He's such a big factor. I think Virginia Tech beats them with Haynes King. I don't think they cover the line if he's playing because he's such a big part if he's healthy and he's playing in that football game. But Virginia Tech needs this. They were expected to have a pretty good year this year, and they've lost some close ball games. And this team right now is trying to fight and get back at least into that bowl hunt to have a kind of a successful season. So a lot of incentive for both teams to play, but Georgia Tech, like so many teams, depend on that guy that holds the ball 50% of the time. That's the quarterback.
Yeah, when you look at Virginia Tech's offense as well, they're coming off a dominant home win over Boston College, 42-21 on a Friday night. Their running back Tootin rushed for 266 yards on the ground. That was a school record, but that goes right into the front seven and strength of Georgia Tech's defense, only giving up 111 rushing yards per game. Do you feel that the rushing attack of Virginia Tech could get going on Saturday afternoon?
No, I think against Georgia Tech, you've got to be able to mix the run with the pass. You're not going to be able to line up and just run every down. You've got to, in fact, you might open the game with a passing attack, just to get them back on their heels because they are geared to stop the run. And Virginia Tech needs to run well. And like I tell a lot of people, if you want to run the football, throw 3 or 4 passes to start the game just to get your defensive secondary and people backing up or playing on their heels instead of playing on their toes coming forward.
Yeah, now if Haynes King can't go, Coach, it'll be the quarterback, Zach Pyron, that played last week, put up 13 points against one of the better defenses in college football. The potential to maybe have at least a big game under his belt before he heads into Blacksburg could be a benefit for this offense. When you look at Georgia Tech overall, even with Zach Pyron, can they strike the upset? If so, what do they need to do from an offensive perspective against that Hokies secondary and defense?
Well, the quarterback has to have a good game. I thought they would play Notre Dame closer. I thought it would be a closer football game. I think the way they were handled by Notre Dame it's kind of an unknown. Is this quarterback going to get a lot better in his second game? Can he throw the ball like he might need to? So I think it all boils down to him, the guy like him, the quarterback having a good day, and can he mix the pass in the game with him?
I think this game potentially goes over the 51.5. I do lean to Virginia Tech in the matchup. Georgia Tech did win this ball game last year in Blacksburg by a score of 28-27. We'll turn our attention to the big one in Durham, Coach. SMU, only 1 loss on the year, laying 11.5 to Manny Diaz and the Duke Blue Devils after that emotional victory over Florida State. Can Duke be live to knock off SMU on Saturday?
You know, SMU with Jenkins at quarterback, Kevin Jenkins, I think he's one of the best unknown quarterbacks in the country, doing a great job now that he's starting. He did not start the season, but they moved to him very quickly, and they've been unbelievable. They play faster than anybody, and I think this is going to be about Kevin Jenkins against Manny Diaz, the defensive coordinator, head coach at Duke. He's a blitzer. He believes in a blitz attack and attacking that quarterback. And Jennings, give him time, and he'll throw. He moves the pocket well, so they're not going to be able to hit a pocket passer. He's a good dual threat quarterback, and I think it's going to be the quarterback versus the scheme of the defense, which is pressure, get to that quarterback.
Yeah, I lean to the defense as well of SMU in this matchup, even though they're on the road. I think they're a little bit more physical than the Duke offensive defensive line, so I do like SMU in the matchup. Lean to the under 48.5. We saw SMU dominate on the road against Stanford 40-10. Coach, when you look at both of these coaches, big picture, Rhett Lashley for SMU, Manny Diaz for Duke, any shot that they're both there in the same respective programs in 2025? Or do you think they jump for bigger pastures and bigger programs?
Yeah, I think Manny's probably going to be there for a year or two more, but I see Lashley moving up very quickly. He's at SMU, but SMU is very committed to building that program, getting the transfer portal, got the money behind the program, but he's probably going to be looked at for a bigger job, Manny, because of what happened at Miami. He's probably a few wins away from that.
We'll see how these games play out. We'll be back for week number 10 in the ACC. For Coach Bowden, I'm Joe Lisi. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you next week.